The following program is seen statewide on California Public Television.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall.
It was one of those picture-perfect afternoons, and we were driving down Highway 29 right in the heart of Napa Valley. The drive took us through the nice little wine country town of St. Helena and through some beautiful vistas filled with vineyards. Now, I should have been thinking about wine, but for some strange reason, all I could think about was corn and wheat, which turned out to be just fine, because we ended up in a very historic and beautiful place that was directly connected with corn and wheat, as well as being one of California's golden parks. Well, here we are. We have arrived, and here to greet us is Ranger Bill Grummer. And Ranger, you have heard, haven't you, why we have come to this state park?
Well, I heard, Huell, that you're looking for corn.
Corn, and this is the place to find it, right?
This is it, Huell.
Well, a beautiful place it is, too.
Oh, yes.
It's a beautiful fall afternoon, and looking at the trees, boy, you have got some beautiful trees here. I'm just looking up here at this one.
Oh,
this is one of the most, that's an oak tree, right?
Valley oak.
That is one of the most beautiful oak trees I think I've ever seen. How old is that thing?
It's hard to say. That tree is, could be 200, 250 years old. Valley oaks grow to be the largest oaks in the country. They're the biggest ones, and of course they used to cover the Napa Valley floor. Most of them have disappeared today because of the agriculture, but there's still a few of these old beauties left.
Boy, that is an old beauty too. And look here, we've got this wonderful kind of a wooden walkway bridge over here going under this canopy of trees. You got a lot of different kind of trees here in the park.
Well, of course, right now we're nearing on a stream, so you do have different trees: redwoods, maples.
Now here's the stream right down here, and this stream kind of gives a clue as to the corn that we're looking for, doesn't it?
It sure does.
There has to be that stream in order to go where we're going and see what we're getting ready to see.
And the clue is in the name of the stream.
What's the name of the stream?
Mill Creek.
Mill Creek. Okay, we're getting warmer. Let's walk on down here. This is absolutely beautiful. Now, this isn't a big park, is it?
No, it's probably one of the smaller state parks. It's only 3/4 of an acre. But
the whole park is 3/4 of an acre?
It is, but it's surrounded by another park, both in Napa Valley State Park, which is about 2,000 acres.
So that's where all the camping and recreation and all of that takes place. This park is just 3/4 of an acre, and it's here for one reason. And here is the reason, right here, right in front of us. This is our destination in this state park. And now we can give away the name of it, Ranger. The name of this park is?
Bale Grist State Historic Park.
Well, this is going to be quite an adventure, I can tell. We have now hooked up with Joe and Artie Strange, and you all are kind of the living history component of this grist mill. Tell us a little bit about it, because it holds a record, doesn't it?
Yes, sir. It's the largest wooden water wheel west of the Mississippi. It's 36.5 feet.
Now, wait a minute. It's the largest wooden water wheel west of the Mississippi.
Yes, and there's only one larger in all of North America, and it's not as pretty as this one.
Wow. When was this built?
This was originally built in the 1840s. The large water wheel was put on in the early 1850s because of the gold rush, which changed everything out here in California.
So what do you mean? They got a bigger wheel in the 1850s because there was more corn to grind?
There was more grain to grind, and they automated the mill, and they put on that little gear that's up there up on top. And that gear drove all the upstairs equipment, elevators and augers to move the grain around so people didn't have to do it anymore.
You know, I don't think I've ever seen a water wheel this big. This is a huge, imposing structure.
Yes, it is. It's a wonderful wheel. And it's called an overshot wheel because the water comes down over the top of the wheel.
So wait a minute, this water would have come in from what, the creek that we just walked over?
Yes, Mill Creek.
And it was elevated up and then dropped down on the water wheel.
Yes, so gravity drives this wheel, not current. An undershot wheel is driven by current. This wheel is driven by gravity. The water is pulled down and it's much more efficient.
Now we can hear traffic on Highway 29. It's just right out here by the mill.
Yes.
This grist mill was originally placed on the side of a busy road, what is today Highway 29, because this was kind of the center of activity in the whole Napa Valley.
Yes, that road was originally an Indian trail, and then when the settlers came in, it became a road and then a highway, and that's how the grain got to the mill, was up that road.
Well, as beautiful as it is outside, the real payoff is inside the grist mill, right?
That's where all the work is done, is inside.
Work done and made possible, and let's just stand back and get one more shot of it, by this big old water wheel that's been turning here for well over 155 years now. We're inside the mill, and this place looks, smells, and feels like I thought a mill might look, smell, and feel. This is the real thing.
When people come in, they comment on the smells, because the smells, they say, smells like an old building, smells like flour.
Smells like an old mill.
Yes, it does.
And
yes,
look down here at these gears. Now, these are like the ones outside.
These are a bit different. The two outside are cast iron. These gears, this has a wooden tooth gear here.
These are wooden, and look underneath here. Are these wooden as well?
Every other gear in the mill has wooden teeth. Yes, it does.
Now, how old are those things?
The gears themselves had to be recreated because during the First and Second World War, they stripped a lot of the metal here, so that had to be redone. The biggest piece of original metal we have is the hub on the water wheel out there. That was put up there in 1851. That's the original hub.
Boy, that is a beautiful hub,
That's
too.
a beautiful wheel.
The workmanship in this place, this was really a work of art, this whole operation, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. And one of the things that they did is they put on the western front on the building, if you notice that, and to make it more attractive to people going by.
So they wanted to draw attention to
Yes,
themselves.
they did.
Mills were probably competing with each other for business, weren't they? Or was this the only game in town?
This was the only game within a 10-mile radius, and that's about what a mill served. It would serve about a 10-mile radius.
Now, how hard is it to get all of this up to speed? Because we're going to be able to see this operating today.
Oh, we can do it in about 10 minutes as
Really?
well.
Get
Yes,
it
sir.
from this up to speed.
Yes.
What is this thing over here?
That's the actual millstone. That's what they look like.
Well, I don't understand. What would it... Does
That's-
it turn around?
That's the business end, wherever.
Look
all
over
this is
here.
done. The way to picture this is a big old Oreo cookie. There's the bottom cookie here. Instead of frosting in the middle, we have grain. That's the upper cookie. That's going to come and set down on top of here.
Are we going to see that today?
It'll be inside the cover here because.
Oh, okay. So you've got one like this.
These are wheat. This is where the wheat, rye, barley was done.
And
The
you've got one
corn
just
was
like this inside
in
here.
The corn is done over here. These are a little bit smoother than the corn stones because corn is a coarser grain, so these are a little rougher.
So this is the bottom stone.
That's the bed stone, yes, sir.
Then you put the corn or the wheat
The wheat
over
comes in
this. It
down
comes through the hole.
eye of the stone. That's the
And then
eye
you
of the
lift
stone.
this thing up with these big lifts here, bring the stone over, put it down on top of here, and it goes around.
But that stone better not touch this stone because then you're grinding grain, and we never grind grain. We mill grain. For thousands of years, people ground grain, and that's why for thousands of years, people had short teeth. And short teeth aren't in fashion anymore because you rub two stones together, you get a lot of grit in your flour.
And people were eating that.
Take a picture, look at a picture of an Egyptian mummy. There's short teeth. because they ground their flour. So if these stones touch, I made a mistake, and you'll be able to tell that real easy. When we're milling, these stones are about as far apart as a thick sheet of paper. They are real close together, but they don't touch. We have that runner stone, that's called a runner stone, spinning around about a thickness of a sheet of paper away from this stone.
Who would have thought that they were that precise? I always thought it was just two big stones grinding whatever was in between them.
These stones were put here in 1847. That's the first harvest these stones milled, which is why I get a kick out of this job. I get to mill with stones that people who came out here in wagon trains were using 155 years ago. But if we rub these stones together, you rub rocks together, they're not going to last for 155 years.
So the stones here and the stones inside this wooden case here are 150 years old?
Yes, sir.
These are the original stones.
These are the original stones.
Well, let's get this thing going. I want to see this thing grinding.
Here's my on-off switch right here.
Here it is, look.
Turn this.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, now all the gearing and everything's going to stop. And well, it's going to grind to a halt because you're in a mill, actually. And once that's stopped, then we can engage the gearing, and then we can restart it up and get the stones turning. So now we actually do have to wait.
Oh my gosh. Now what's happening here, Joe?
We got corn going in, we're getting cornmeal coming out, but I have to adjust it first, and I'm using what's called a rule of thumb to do that. To feel the flour.
What do you mean adjust it?
Adjust the space between the stones.
So you turn this handle here, and that lowers the stone or raises the stone?
Lowers the stone, and that gives me the spacing between the stones that I want.
What's that smell I'm smelling now?
Oh, the miller just made a mistake.
What do you mean?
He did is he got the stones going a little too fast, so he started to burn it in there. And the miller has to pay attention to that burning smell, and he does that by keeping his nose to the grindstone, and that's where that came from.
See, you really can smell the burning of the flour, can't you?
Yes, sir. And we just got, once we get it running, we'll have everything balanced out. Okay, now I'm ready for the bag.
So this is your bag that you use for while you're getting the stones adjusted.
Yes, sir.
Then you bring in the bag for the flour that you're actually going to sell people.
Yes, sir.
Now, would one person do all of this? You look like you're very busy.
One person could run and do the milling, but somebody else is going to take the bags and sew them up as they did in the old days. And that's the miller's assistant would do that.
Now here comes the miller's assistant here, your wife. Would the wife have actually helped the miller back in the old days?
She would have, because in the old days, especially back in medieval England, the miller couldn't make enough money just doing the milling. He had to have another job, and then his wife could run the mill while he was out doing that.
So he would get the thing started,
yes,
and then leave?
And then leave,
and
then
she
come
would
back.
do all the work?
And she'd keep her nose to the grindstone, yes.
Is that a real expression? Is that really where that came
That's
from?
where that came from. That came from milling.
You're kidding.
No, sir.
Keep your nose to the grindstone, and did that mean to smell whether it was burning like you had done earlier?
Like you just smelled, yes, sir. That's what the miller had to do, is keep his nose to the grindstone, pay attention to the odors, pay attention to business, because that tells you what's going on. And you can't see what's going on inside here. The smells told you.
Now, explain to us how this works, because you've got the wheat up in the top there.
The grain or the grist for the mill goes into the hopper up here, comes out the little hole down in the front. And this is called the shoe, this wooden box here. And the shoe's held up by leather straps. This is the damsel, the metal piece here. Once the damsel starts to turn, it rocks the shoe. And that's what feeds the grain down into the eye of the stone down here. And then where it's milled.
Now, is this basically the way milling has been done for hundreds, for thousands of years?
For hundreds of years. The Romans developed this process of keeping the stones separated. Before that, the stones would rub together and they would grind the grain.
Now, wait a minute, it's going faster now. What's going on?
I just set it up a little bit.
So wait a minute, this lever right here determines how fast it's going around.
That's the speed control. When you look at the wheel outside there, the water flowing over the wheel, how much water you have controls the speed of the mill. This controls how much water is flowing over the wheel.
You let the gate up
Yes,
to get more and more water.
More water, more speed. Less water, less speed.
Now, when you adjust this wheel, you're basically adjusting the stones so that you'll end up with different the coarseness of the flour itself.
Yes, sir.
So now this feels very fine right here.
Now, the only difference, if I was going to run polenta, the only difference between cornmeal and polenta is the space between the stones.
What's polenta?
Polenta is a coarse ground cornmeal. They use it as a side dish, especially the Italians. And if I was going to run polenta, the stones would be farther apart.
Would a miller be known by how fine he could get his flour? I mean, how would a miller establish his reputation?
A miller would establish his reputation by being honest more than anything, and the quality of the flour he produced.
Now, what do you mean being honest?
To make sure that if you brought in 50 pounds of grain, you got 50 pounds of flour back. Because back then, before the gold rush, it was all the barter system. And they didn't pay the miller. The miller would keep 1/6 of what he milled. It was all barter. It was a trade system. There wasn't much money in California before the gold rush.
Our first look at the corn itself in its kernel stage. Now, was this area a big area for growing and grinding corn?
They did grow some corn here, although this comes from the Sacramento Valley here. And the bulk of the crop in this valley was wheat. That's what they were growing to feed those hungry gold miners up there. And this is the grist for the mill here.
There's another expression,
Another
the
expression.
grist for the mill.
Yes.
So this is called the grist.
That's the grist. Grist is grain that's ready to be ground. It's ready to go on the stones. In the case of corn, it's been husked and shucked. If in the case of wheat, it's been harvested and threshed.
Isn't that amazing, the number of expressions we use in today's society that came from the old mill?
Yes, and we don't know where they came from for the most part. Until
Grist for the mill. Here it is, right here.
it's something our grandparents knew, but we've forgotten.
Okay, you got your wife working for you for a minute while you came over to show us this little, these little displays you have laid out here.
This is a bearded wheat, the type of wheat they would have grown then. And inside these little pods here are what we want to make flour. And it's the threshing process that gets these berries out of those pods.
So wait a minute, we go from the wheat down to the hard red wheat.
Yes.
And that's called
Wheat berries. That's
wheat berries.
Grist for the mill. This is what goes on the stone.
White wheat.
That's for pastry.
There's your corn.
For cornmeal and polenta.
There's your rye.
For a rye flour for making bread.
And here is the cup full of the finished product right here.
That's a bread wheat right there. And you can feel that and see how soft that is compared to the cornmeal.
Wait a minute, this is even softer than...
Oh, yeah.
This is like talcum powder.
Yes, this does a good job. This is a good mill.
What did they use this for?
That's for bread wheat. That's a bread flour there.
Now, how close would those stones have to be together to make something this fine?
About 3/1000ths of an inch.
You're kidding.
Thickness of a little sheet of paper in there, yes.
3/1000th of an inch.
Yes. The cornmeal is about 5, polenta is about 9 to 10 thousandths.
I'm tempted. I got to do this.
Oh, go ahead.
Was that a way of testing it back then?
Oh yes, if your stones are too tight, it gets kind of oily, and it needs to be dusty like that. It needs to be powdery.
So people would actually come in and...
Well, you could do that. It's one of the tests. You squeeze it also to see if it sticks together, but blowing it, it should blow away like that. That's good wheat. Somebody did a good job there.
Now, Bill was telling me that these stones came from France.
These are what's called French burr stones. The best millstones in the Western world came out of some quarries north of Paris. Granite stones that you would quarry up here, because we do have rocks back up here. And those stones, if you quarried them, are going to last for 10 to 12 years. The French burr stones, the working life's 125 years.
That is
They're as hard as an emerald. It's a very hard stone.
So they would literally have shipped these millstones all the way out here to the Napa Valley from France in 1846.
Well, from about 1843 to 1846, because it took about 3 years. The old sea captains would buy them and put them in the bottom of their ship for ballast. They came across, Dr. Bale's agent bought them in Philadelphia, went around the Horn, San Francisco, up to Napa.
I'm getting choked. There's so much. This flour is so fine that it's in the air.
This mill does a good job. Yes, it is. It is in the air. There was something called Miller's lung that you could develop after a while.
See, I knew there was something in my lung. There's also something kind of getting under my contact lenses. There's all kind of stuff in the air here.
You could also get Miller's thumb, which Chaucer wrote about. From flat thumb, from going like this for a whole lifespan.
To feel how
Feel the flour, yeah.
the flower is
Yeah.
done. You know, this is so elementary, and yet it's so basic, and yet it's so finely tuned that the miller was really an artist, a skilled artist, wasn't he?
Yes, there's 8,000 pounds of stone sitting on this old wooden frame. That's a lot of weight. And then you get a ton of stones spinning at 80 times a minute. You have to be careful. You have to watch what you're doing. And I do have to...
Oh, wait a minute. We're about to fill up. Look, we filled up a sack here. And you probably, in the transfer, wouldn't want to spill any on the floor, would you?
No. I have to get this back in.
See, the miller is always...
Got to keep the nose to the grindstone.
Another... How many puns are there about milling in the mills?
Knock it down. There's quite a few sayings that came out of the mills because at the time, 90% of the people lived on farms. So they would come in, have their grain milled, and it was all barter system, so they'd want to take the flour home. So the farmer would actually stay here and he'd talk to his friends, talk to his neighbors, talk to the miller, exchange stories, gossip. He would mill around. That's what he did.
And it's gotten very quiet in here.
Yes,
when
we have
that
to
thing
shut it
stops, boy, it gets quiet real fast.
Yes, it does get very quiet.
Now, why'd you have to quit?
I was running out of corn in the hopper up there.
So
And
if you run out of corn, those stones would start what?
They'll start to touch because that upper stone, that ton of stone is balanced on this point right here. That's balanced right here, that's stones. And that fits right into that little bar up there. And so when that stone is here, it can wiggle around. And if you don't have grain in between here, that's your padding, that's your lubricant, then the stones can touch. Wow. And if they touch, you got a problem.
This is so interesting. Do people, when they come here to this park, have any idea what they're getting into?
I don't think so, because they most likely have never seen anything like this, especially like the large wheel that you were impressed with.
Yeah, and the school kids must just go crazy watching that.
Oh, they do, for sure. They'll sit here and tell them to sit on the floor and let their feet hang down, and they will watch it run and listen to the sounds. And you would think with video games now they wouldn't, but they really do. They get mesmerized by this.
But isn't it interesting that today something like this is so special and so unique, and just a few years ago, just in the last century, back in the late 1800s, the village mill was the center of life in the community, wasn't it?
Yes, they were very common in farming areas. Even today, you get people come in from Alabama, Georgia, southern Missouri in the 70s, and when they were children, 10, 12 years old, that was their Saturday morning job, take some grain to the mill. The miller would check out some into a toll box. That was his payment for milling, and they would take the rest home, take that ground grain home. And that's not that long ago.
What happened to the old grist mills?
There are two things that killed these mills primarily. There were 31 of them in the Bay Area, 7 in the valley here alone. And what killed them was when the railroad came in. The railroad came in through the 1870s, brought two things. One was steam power. Now you had mechanization, automation came to the West Coast big time.
So they didn't need these water wheels.
They didn't need the water wheels anymore. The other thing that the railroad actually brought in was the hard red winter wheat that you saw. The flour you saw over there, you can't grow that here. It doesn't get cold enough out here in California in the valley to grow that. So they're growing a soft white wheat that made terrible bread. Made wonderful doorstops if you try to make bread. And the miners are actually writing home saying California bread is terrible. The railroad came in and started bringing the hard red winter wheat from back east, put the farmers here out of the wheat business.
So these things went out of, they just went right down the tube.
Yes, sir, and this is the only one that survived in the state of California, was this mill here.
Why did this one survive?
Reverend Lyman, who bought it in 1871, protected it, and it ended its life as a feed mill. The last commercially milled grain was about 1903, 1905, and there's a lot of luck involved, too, that it didn't get burned down or wasn't destroyed.
So you mean the last time it actually operated as a mill was 1905?
Yes, yes. And
those are those pictures I've seen of it growing up in ivy and looks like it's going to fall down.
Yes. It was covered with ivy. That was cleared off 3 times. It went to rack and ruin. That's why many of the timbers in here had to be replaced. This is one of the original hand-hewn timbers out of the 1840s. That's
this
one
right
of the original.
Here is from 1840.
Yes, and it was done with a broad axe, boom, 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 and that's one of the originals.
So if people want to see what a real mill was, this is where they come.
This is where they come, yes, sir.
In every aspect.
In every aspect, yep. We're still working, still driven by water, and still making flour.
The old-fashioned way.
Old-fashioned way on those old stones, yes.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Howser. I sure hope you enjoyed our visit to Bale Grist Mill State Historic Park in Napa Valley. And if you'd like to see this historic place again or share it with your family and friends, it's available on video cassette. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727 and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.